All right, if everyone can quiet down. We are going live on YouTube, so if you can be quiet during the duration of the panel until the Q&A, we greatly appreciate that. All right.
And please tweet as much as you can now.
Oh, yes. Because during the Q&A, we actually are going to be reading the reposted tweets and asking the questions to the panelists if you don't feel comfortable asking out loud yourself. So, okay? All right, great. So, welcome to the inaugural MIMS Women in Music Industry Expert Panel. We are so thrilled to have the following leading women here with us with tons of experience in the music industry at senior management positions. And so we'll start with Roberta Hickey, who is
the label and talent manager of MTV UK.
And we have Abby Janae.
She is the CEO and music lawyer, CEO of Afrotown Records and a music lawyer.
Yes. And Coco Khan.
A senior editor of Complex UK.
And Andrea Magdalena.
She's the founder and CEO of She Said So.
Mm-hmm. Meg Nickel.
She's a BASCA executive committee. She's on the BASCA executive committee and singer, songwriter, and producer.
And we have Kehinde Olaranmoye.
A former Warner Chappell Music A&R department and now music manager.
Yes, yes. So let's welcome them. We're so glad that we'll be having them. So we would love for you all to start out to just tell us about your journey in the music industry from when you first entered to how it's changed presently. And if you faced any challenges along the way, and if you have any resources and tips that you would like to share for those interested in following your footsteps.
That's for me?
Anybody can go first?
Yeah.
So we'll start with Roberta?
Yeah, okay.
Cool, so I kind of first started out, I kind of have zigzagged my way to kind of where I am now. So my passion was always to work in music, but I ended up kind of starting in digital. So I used to do digital planning and buying, so buying digital advertising for brands. So I mainly worked on Coca-Cola. And basically I knew that I ultimately wanted to work in music. So anything that was going on that was music orientated or that was just kind of reaching the youth market, I was very vocal about being involved in and was really trying to get as much as I could out of kind of that role. But also I found starting in digital and becoming an expert in the digital space was something that's really kind of helped me throughout. So I kept doing that, and through working digital, I've realised that was about 6-7 years ago, that social media was just becoming huge and was just becoming just a massive platform for reaching people, whether that is an artist doing it or a brand. So I did a course to learn more about social media strategy, which I then did, and then I used that to then run social media for artists. So that's kind of was my first entry into fully music, and I used to run it for the electronic music DJ Cole Cox, and his night call at Space, and then his label Intech, because I kind of worked out in Ibiza before I moved down to London. So it was just kind of using all of my experiences and my passion and things I'd learned along the way to bring together to that moment that was the first time I actually entered into the, I would say, music industry. And then from there, moved over to work kind of, again, bringing everything together with brands and artists. So creating campaigns. So we did one with Guinness, with Foles, Rudimental and Lady Leisha, which was an online piece, which was great. And then moved over to MTV into the label and talent. So I realised kind of through the journey that what I really liked was working with artists, and I really wanted to be able to make a difference for artists and to make the most of having platforms for them to be able to kind of show their music on, and to create content and also show the kind of youth generation, which as MTV, that's what we speak to show them to be able to feed them great music, basically, and give them the stuff that they want. So that's how I ended up at MTV. It's quite a long way, but to kind of give you an idea that if you don't get into the kind of industry or your dream job that you want straight away, then don't give up. Just see what you can take from it to then keep forward and just keep going, basically.
Yeah, fully immerse yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Abby?
Hey everybody, I'm Abby Janae. I've always had a passion for music, so I didn't know exactly what I wanted to be at the time, but when I first knew that I loved music is probably growing up on grime music. I don't know if you guys are familiar with grime. And then there was a guy called Skepta. Well, you probably know who he is. So I was on his street team. So that's how I started, like, with music. So I was on Skepta's street team, like, this was like 10 years ago, and was promoting him through marketing, mainly, and, you know, street team promotions. But then I was more interested on the intellectual side of music. So that's more like copyrights and trademarks. So I was like, okay, you know, this is what I'm interested in. So that's what led me to study law. So, you know, I studied music law and intellectual property, and then qualified as a lawyer. So that's probably what brought me into that. And recently I've founded my own seminar. It's called the Music Law Seminar. And that's basically to educate young artists about their intellectual property rights, about copyrights, about trademarks, about contracts that you need in the music industry, such as recording contracts, publishing contracts, digital distribution contracts as well, and, you know, split share agreements. So that's what my passion is, really, just to help and educate artists with their rights within the music industry and how to protect themselves better. And I also founded my own record label called Afrotown Records, which was also earlier this year, and we're supported by Virgin. So it's been quite a journey, but what I would say is that if, you know, you're passionate about music and you don't know exactly what it is that you want to get into, just try and get your foot into the door and, you know, test the different waters before you decide what you want to get into. Yeah.
Awesome. And Coco?
Hi guys. It's on?
Yeah.
Hi. So I'm Coco. I'm senior editor at Complex UK, or at least I was until last week. I'm just telling you that in case any of you find me on Twitter and think I'm a liar and I'm an imposter. I'm not. I was senior editor at Complex till last week. I joined The Guardian this week. But I'm still with the Complex family, so it's okay, I can speak. So I got into journalism. I started when I was at university. I was on my university newspaper, the Warwick Boar. And I know, high times. And we were lucky enough to be entered into the Guardian Student Media Awards, and off the back of that, the staff that were editors, we won, and off the back of that, we got internships. So that was the first time I sort of went into the real world of journalism. I worked on The Guide, which is a pull-out in Saturday's Guardian, which is all about like music, and I basically just did reviews of One Tree Hill. I don't know, yeah, if you remember that show. Just did that for like however long I was there. And one of the things that I should say is that, like all these guys, your sort of pathway into music is diverse. There's no sort of set way to get into it. I personally wouldn't say here that I got to 18, 19, 20 and were like, I just want to be a music journalist. That didn't really happen. I was just interested in popular culture, whether that be the best films, the best TV, the best fashion, the best food, the best whatever. I just wanted to be around what was new and interesting. And actually these days the music industry isn't just about music, it's also about being all of those things and representing those things. So, you know, Skepta's a perfect example for that. He's a fashion icon now, right? So I started off doing all these like odds and ends and just basically knocking on doors being like, let me write, I'll do whatever. What's that? You need this? I'll do this. You need this? I need this. And I managed to secure myself a job which was slightly related. So my first job when I came out of university, if any of you guys watch Have I Got News For You, you know, they have that bit where they're like, and today's news is from Fisherman's Monthly or something. Somebody's making those, and for a while that was me. I was making them. And it was like boring and soul-crushing, but it gave me an overview of understanding how magazines work, how they make money, and having that sort of sense outside of the kind of like, I like fancy things and going to parties and doing selfies with stuff, actually understanding how the industry worked, meant that when I finally got to a point where I was like, look, I've done Fisherman's Friend, whatever, for 3 years now, I want to move, I was able to get jobs, and I'd accumulated enough freelance credentials through various magazines, Dazed, Vice, Complex, whoever, to then start looking at getting staff jobs in the areas that I wanted to look at. So that's kind of where it happened for me. Yeah.
All right, nice. I didn't know that.
And Andrea.
I kind of fell into music by mistake. My background is in technology and startups, and I was really passionate about coding and everything techie, and there weren't that many ladies in tech at that point, definitely not developers. And by just keeping up with all sorts of tech people around London, investors and entrepreneurs, I met one of the founders of Mixcloud, which is this streaming platform that's based in London. And they got me on, they stole me away from another startup actually, as a community manager, which meant I was dealing with all the users of Mixcloud, which at that point there was about 300K of them, but I was mainly focusing on our top 500. And that was a really good introduction for me into music. Fast forward 3 years, I took it upon myself to move to LA and set up shop for them there, and that was 2 years ago. Did that for about 9 months, and then kind of fell off. They decided to, focus a little bit more on Europe first, and then go out there. And then, in the meantime, I was faced with certain challenges. One of my biggest challenges, because I know you asked that, was being Romanian. I'm from Romania in England. That's I'm being I've very often been stigmatized, because of that. And then secondly, being a young woman in music and in tech in general, and being at, very senior meetings and not having a voice because probably my opinion didn't count at that point. So I decided to do something about it myself. So that's how She Said So was born while I was still in London at Mixcloud. 3 months later, I moved to LA, and it all just kept on going. And I can tell the story about She Said So later, but in the meantime, from LA, I started managing for artists as well together with my husband. And yeah, that's pretty much what I do now.
And Meg.
Greetings. It's great to be here today, and especially great because Brittany and AK have set this up, and I think it's absolutely amazing. So I'm really delighted that I'm sitting here in a panel and they're heading it. My journey would probably take us at least 2.5 hours because I'm so much older than everybody here on this panel. And I can safely say that I am, just like they are, and I can see it in the making, a ducker and diver. I am a ducker and diver in the music industry. I started out as a performer, and I actually went to drama college, but what I really wanted to do was music. And so by hook or by crook, I went through varying sort of incarnations to get there, but the one thing that I always was a songwriter. And so even when I was at drama college, I was very, very busy solving problems like writing songs for productions and eventually getting paid with for it with a bottle of wine or something, until I suddenly realized that you could earn money as a songwriter. So I came down to London, and along with my songwriting, I also started working in the West End as a performer. Eventually, that all changed a little bit, and the emphasis keeps changing as your job keeps changing, really, and as the opportunities come up. And the opportunities came up for me to be a presenter on various pop shows. So I've done quite a few network pop shows, things that you would never have heard of, but one person has at the back there, because I remember you saying, which was something called Get It Together. And I did Pop Quest with a few of the DJs that, believe it or not, are still around today. And then I've always been really interested in helping other people within the industry, particularly songwriters. And so I now sit on the Songwriters Executive of BASCA, which is the British Academy of Songwriters, Composers, and Authors. And I'm also on the committee of the PRS Members Fund, which looks after songwriters and composers who've fallen on hard times. I still songwrite. And in fact, I had my first opera out last year, which I called Joined Up Songwriting. And that was a bit scary because I'd never done that before. But while the industry was busy kind of struggling, sort of trying to earn money in other areas, I was busy networking with some classical guys. And I thought, the time is now to cross over if you want to live in this industry and still make a living. So that's just a little bit about me. Thank you.
Thank you. And Kiende.
That was very good. Hello, everyone. Okay, so my journey started a little bit past 20 years ago. I, like yourself, or maybe it was actually you, Andrea, I didn't actually seek to work in the music industry. My passion was always sport. But it was like summer holidays, and my mum said to me, you know, you can't sit around, you've got to find something to do. And I was flicking through the Evening Standard, and as you do as a student, and there was this advertised course, and it was a government-funded course. And basically what it is, you do an MVQ, and part of the course you do a 6-month work experience. And I've always had passion for music, but never saw it as a profession. So I signed up. I mean, the course basically was to learn how to type. It said, learn how to type in a week. And I was like, wow, okay, cool. So I called up, got a place on the course, and then I chose a music profession because I love music. Anyway, so my first placement was at East West, which is now Atlantic, and I was in the press department, and literally I was cutting out clippings of their bands and their artists and put it on paper and then filing it. And I thought, that's not a job. So I did the full 6 months, and I was actually glad there wasn't a placement at the end of that. So I went back to the college, did another course, and then I got placed in a company called Warner Chappell. Now, I didn't know about music publishing either. It was like a new world, basically. All I knew about the records, the artists, but didn't understand where the songs came from. So it was real education for me. So I was placed in the tape room library, learning about the catalogue, back catalogues and all that kind of stuff. And then I just spontaneously was giving my opinion on the stuff that I was recording, unbeknownst to myself that the head of A&R, who happened to be a woman, took note of my remarks and actually offered me a job as her assistant because I was bold enough to say, I like that, I didn't like that, what was that, want more information. So I was there as her assistant, as well as 2 other A&R managers for 3.5 years. And then I got the bite for it, and I was like, okay, I quite like this, I could do this for a profession. But I was like, okay, I need to know what to do. And then she said, well, take some years, you have to go out and find a talent. So I was like, okay, cool. So by day, I was an assistant. By night, I was scouting. And the first artist I brought in was a young artist called Shola Amma, and she was 15 at the time. And she got signed to Warner's, and she had a very successful first record. And then from then, I just literally got the bug and just kept scouting. And eventually, I got promoted to A&R, and I worked in that company for about 15 years before leaving, and then venturing off, exploring different areas and aspects of the business, because there's so much more about the industry than just records and publishing. I then got into brand association, so it's basically teaming up the brands with artists. And then I got into PR, so I worked with one of the big PR companies and understanding the sort of functions of that. And so I've got like a real overview of sort of the music industry and the function, how it works, all the components. I think what's important is networking, getting out there, and like my fellow panelists have already said, it's about testing the water to find where you sit comfortably within the music business, because it's not just about the frontline A&R. Yes, it's great and it can be glamorous from the outside looking in, but it's a very competitive area of the music industry. And also, it's not necessarily as rewarding as you think it is But if that's what you want to do, then I'd say go for it. But do as much research as you can and connect with as many people as possible, because it's the connections that's really going to help you and will further you in your career. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. Yeah, thanks. So let's start with the first question. If you type in sexism in the music industry into Google, it shows more than 600,000 results. But most of the articles are focused on the female artist. So do you think female professionals put their job at risk by speaking out about sexism or issues in the music industry? Whoever wants to
I
start.
understand the question, sorry.
Say it again.
Do you think that female professionals have to be more aware about what they say about sexism or other issues in the music industry because they put their job at risk?
I think it's all about the way you say stuff.
Yeah.
Because I think if you're kind of, I don't know, naming and shaming a guy in your office that you feel is a bit sexist, that's just not the way to go about it. I think it's being diplomatic about it, and if you are wanting to speak out about an issue that I suppose could be seen as controversial, I would say definitely do it in a way that does protect yourself and do it in a way that is kind of, more like looking for a solution rather than being very negative. I'd say do it in a more of a like progressive way and kind of looking forward at ways to overcome it rather than being negative about it and negative about the industry, if that's me.
I think previously women used to be stigmatized and used to be scared of speaking out because it would put their jobs in peril. But nowadays, not so much, and especially being part of, she said so, obviously I'm at the forefront of all of these conversations, and women do speak out, and they do that because it's a safe space surrounded by other women who do understand the situation. But at the same time, as a result of getting that confidence from the support that they get from like-minded individuals, they make the courage to speak out. And it all happened, less than 2 years ago, when with Keisha is a good example for once. And plenty of others came out. A lot of, she said, so I'm not going to name names at the moment, but a lot of them spoke out. As a result, they felt more confident. And in fact, now it's actually, I feel like the industry at large has kind of got to a point where everybody is aware that you cannot display sexist behavior or else you will be called out. And you cannot organize events where you program a lineup, whether it's speakers or artists, and not have any women on stage. It's not, because you will be called out by the industry, not necessarily by a woman, and it's just not acceptable, which is great. That means that things are improving.
Can I just add to you, because you made reference to, I've forgotten the artist's name now.
Kesha.
Keisha, yeah, sorry. Am I correct in saying that when she came out, everyone basically, well, not everyone, but the press attacked her and made out as if her career was over, and that's why she screamed rape. So what I'm trying to make is, although we have moved on, I still think there is a new issue around that whole sexism in terms of speaking out, because maybe perhaps the way she did do it, and she put it out there on social media and not dealt with it privately, that she got sort of attacked.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, because even in music you can do stuff procedurally. Like there are sort of managers you can speak to, you know, there's HR departments, you know, there are people you could speak to in confidence, and it doesn't really need to be made public as in social media or going to the press.
Well, honestly, I think that the whole Keisha story was very well planned. Strategically, I think she spoke with someone in advance and said, okay, just put it on social media. And that's what created the big blast that it did, you know. That's my opinion. It might be a conspiracy theory.
No, but that's probably because she wasn't believed. It's that my thing is, you know, I think today lives are lived too much on social media. So I think it trivializes the actual... that trivializes the seriousness of that of an issue of someone being abused or taken advantage of. And I think, like Abby said, I think there are procedures, there are ways of, tackling certain situations, and it doesn't have to be put on social media, because I think, you can't help thinking, oh, she's trying to get attention. I'm not saying that's what she did, but you can't help think that, because obviously we lived in the era of the Kardashians and all of that. Everyone wants that space on social media. So there's that issue of, are they telling the truth, or they're just trying to make a name for themselves, or are they trying to get endorsement? Because that's basically what social media is like.
Either
used
way,
for.
you got to start talking about it. So
Yeah.
in that sense, I think it worked.
I think that female performers still have a problem with sexist behavior, partly because of the competitiveness of the industry itself, and that to actually speak out when they are perhaps on the process of actually building and climbing the ladder on their career is a very, very difficult thing to do. It's also, as you're on your way up, you're very lonely on that ladder, I think, sometimes. And certainly, although it has got better, in my career when I first started, I really did have to spend a lot of time grinning and running away. It doesn't happen so much anymore, but it did. And it was very, very difficult, and I can think of an instance, for instance, on a particular pop program that I spent the whole series trying to be absolutely congenial and very friendly and everything, and it got to the very last night party. I managed to kind of get through it all, and I was aware that I was a woman within the context of a situation where it was mostly men that were running the show. And I was about to tell you what the television station was, and I thought I better not do that. But all I can say was, my main thing was, I'm not sure if I had actually made it public that I would have been asked back to present the program again. And that you begin to think, I'm going to lose my job because of this. However, on the last night, and they had a last night party, and I'd put up with a lot. And I think I might have had just one little glass of wine too many. And as I was walking up the stairs, a hand went up the back of my skirt, and I turned around and automatically just slapped the guy. Unfortunately, it was the director. So I spent all those weeks, and there we go. That's it. But I think things have changed a little bit since those times.
My feeling is that it's, for me, I'm just sort of like, sexism exists in the music industry, sexism exists in every industry. Like, no industry exists outside of society. Sexism is a problem in society. So is homophobia, so is racism, so is classism. And you will find all of that reflected in the music industry. It is a problem. It's a problem for performers. It's a problem for PR people that don't get promoted because they're women. It's a problem when a woman wants to run a record label, but people don't trust her with money. There's a problem all across the way. Social media, yes, has its problems, but it's because if the mainstream organizations won't give you a platform to speak about your experience, then you're going to have to take it out direct to the people, and that's kind of a really great thing to do. Me as a journalist, I feel like I have an obligation to the readers to tell these stories, and sometimes they're not pretty, and sometimes they're not great, and sometimes they're shocking. And maybe I'm a bit jaded because I sit behind a desk and I get those pictures every day about, like, this thing happened, this thing happened, this thing happened. It is a problem, it is rife, it is getting better, but definitely my opinion is the best thing that can happen is people getting on social media and talking about it. My feeling is anyway.
Right. Yes, definitely. For the diversity and inclusion are two very different things. Being a woman in music and being in senior management positions, do you get treated the same respect as your male peers in the same position? Or are there any barriers that you still have to fight, like the little nuances where they might dismiss you if you say, what about if we propose this idea? and they'll completely disregard it. Have you dealt with that? And if so, how did you respond so that your voice was still heard and you weren't necessarily victimized?
The word victim, I definitely am never going to be a victim. I wouldn't do that. And now I think that I really do think that we do have an obligation to speak out, but I just think that respect probably comes from the how you behave yourself to a certain extent. And if you're a strong person and you speak out, people will respect what you have to say, and they won't necessarily, you're not going to get that negative feedback that you're talking about because you're just one of the company of people who happen to be doing a job.
I think firstly, it's very difficult. It's more difficult for women to get into senior positions to begin with. There's a ceiling there. It's kind of invisible and very subtle, or at least it is more subtle right now. But your doors are a lot fewer than men's because you don't go to the private whiskey bar with the boss. You don't go to the golf club with them, and so on. So you have to kind of create those opportunities for yourself. So that's number one problem. There aren't enough women in senior positions to begin with. And then secondly, in the States, for example, if a woman earns 73 cents per a man's dollar. So in the same position. So there's a very huge difference in pay. So salary is definitely, equal pay is something that we should all take very seriously. And it happens in a very invisible way again because people don't really talk about their salaries, and I feel like as a general rule women feel less comfortable talking about salaries, whereas men, when they go for a drink, which is work fun sort of thing, they bash out numbers. They're very comfortable with that kind of stuff. And whereas historically, because of how we were raised and what the woman's role was, not involved in like money in the family and so on, it's quite an old problem. We haven't really been comfortable negotiating. There was a very interesting thread in the She Said So community. So by the way it works is there's about 1,400 women worldwide in the group. If someone sends an email to the group, everybody receives it. So you can share jobs, you can share opinions, articles, questions. And so one of the questions that someone asked was, I got offered a really cool job in London. I'm supposed to move from Berlin. It's at a very well-regarded sort of music publication, but the pay is really, really, really bad. What do I do to negotiate my salary? I have no idea what. And I wish I had this knowledge when I got my first job in music because I know I was ripped off. I don't know if it was because I'm a girl, most probably not. It's just because obviously every employer is going to want to pay as less as possible at the beginning. But I didn't know that I can actually ask someone for advice, I didn't have a role model. I didn't have a person or a group of people that I can confide in. I know they've been through it and that I can ask about it. So I think some of these issues, if you do find them at work, once you've gone through all the process of getting the salary, the job with the salary that you wanted, is all about communicating properly. And it ties in very well with what you said. But not just internally in the team, just speak out with your friends, with your family, with your network. Working in music, you automatically must need a network within and outside of your work. So historically, a lot of problems have come from being silent, not just as women, but as different minorities in general. So speaking out and communicating in a very objective way would be a very good first step.
And educating also about like even what the standard salary is for certain positions. I feel like if we did more research on our own to justify why we should be making a certain level of income, then we would have better results, honestly. So.
May I just say, though, I think any job within the creative industries, whether you're a man or a woman, they are going to try and pay as little as possible because they perceive it to be a job that you're going to really enjoy doing. And they don't pay well to start with. And it's very well known within the music industry, again, male or female, that quite often are going to get ripped off at the early part of your career because it has been like that. And if you don't do that job, other people won't, you know, there's plenty of other people to step in. And that, I mean, personally, I've been fighting for the fact that I do not think that people should do any kind of apprenticeship things without getting paid, and I know a lot of you have to do that. But I think that if you're doing a job, then yes, you should be paid. You should be acknowledged for it. But it's so difficult within the creative industries to guarantee a really good salary to start with.
I just want to pick up on a couple of the points that you've made. I mean, in terms of top management, I can probably count on one hand how many women hold those big positions, but certainly in records and publishing. And in fact, I won't mention the label, but there's one major label where a man and a woman share the top role, but the man gets paid more than the woman, and she's not doing any less work. It's just the way it is, and I'm not sure why it still continues to this day, but I think it's actually down to us to speak up, and not the fear of losing our jobs because we've spoken out. But if we don't speak up, then this will continue to happen. And I think the business is very archaic in itself, and the jobs have always been for the boys. I mean, there's examples where a guy got made redundant from or got sacked from one company and was employed in another company, and the reason being not because he was particularly good, it's because he said, I couldn't see you without a job because you've got kids to feed. And I'm like, but there's women that can do the job that are far better, successful, but they wouldn't get a look in because they're a woman. And that still happens to this day. This is a recent thing that I'm talking about, like in the last couple of years. And it's laughable, because even there's guys that I know that actually laugh about the situation because they think, but that guy's not even any good. And I'm like, yeah, it's jobs for boys. That is jobs for boys. People say that because that's what happens. And it's unfortunate because I think it's not a question of male, female. It's like if the person is good for the job, they should have that job regardless of their gender. But unfortunately, the gender does play a strong role. And, you know, and there's one woman who was my previous mentor where I was. She holds a MD position at a major label. And it's a struggle for her. But the thing is, she had to sacrifice a lot. She's not married. She's got no kids. Yeah, she's got the big 5-bedroom house, whatever. But she goes home to an empty house. Is that what women have to do in order to get to that position? Exactly. I mean, for me, I don't think that's important for me to like get to that top in order to and not have a life, not have a family. And that's the other thing. When women have a family, they're expected to look after the kids. When men have a family, they've got a wife at home, so they can climb that ladder. So we've got to do two jobs, and not one greater than the other. We have to balance it both and be. If we show any weakness in terms of, I couldn't come in today because my child was sick, you're not good enough for the job. You have to almost hide the fact that you're a mother because it's seen as a weakness.
Yeah, this is so ridiculous, and we should look at Sweden more often. I love Sweden because they are doing so well in the workforce and equality in general. And if a future mother gets pregnant, then the father and the mother get both paternity and maternity leave for a very extended period of time, and it's all paid for. And in general, in Europe, I feel like all companies, there's a certain legislation about making sure that maternity is covered, whereas in the U.S. There's no maternity leave for that's paid for. You're not obliged as a company by law to do that. Some of them do because they're the Googles of the world and so on. But as a general rule, nobody does that. And in fact, I've heard so many stories where women are on the brink of losing their job because they got engaged or they got married. They're thinking, in a year or two, she's just going to have kids. She's not going to be able to do anything. So that's very frustrating. And I feel like another way to treat this symptom, all too often, you know, when it comes down to senior roles being occupied by women, you hear, or any type of roles really to begin with, all too often people say, oh, but there's not enough women applying for this role. And in a lot of cases it's true, which means that the problem is, it starts at a very early age, you know, where there's an equal number of girls and boys studying certain subjects in school, in high school. And I think somewhere in high school, there's a clash where boys go on to continue studying that and making a career out of it. And then the girls kind of fall off and they get into marketing, social media, assistants, at least as feminine jobs, right? It's so ridiculous. And there's a confidence thing that happens there at a young age where the lack of other female role models and the lack of support from peers and the lack of access to information and resources where you are told and exposed to contacts and information and resources and so on. I think that's where it all starts at a young age, and obviously it can go even further back with, you know, the difference between pink toys and dolls for girls and trucks and blue stuff for boys. You know, that's just, it's so messed up. We can't do this anymore, man. Let's buy wooden toys from or something. But it needs to be addressed at a very early age, and I think what she said. So this is what we're going to try to do, just do more work at a university level and even younger at like high school and gymnasium.
And this is why this is very good.
Yes.
I don't know if this is relevant to what we were talking about, but I've come up with a theory just in my head just now. It might be good, maybe needs testing. But I was just thinking back to a couple of years ago. I was working at a magazine which will remain nameless, but it's famous. And the Oscars had just happened, and Emmys had just happened, and we wanted to interview one of the actresses who was an Emmy winner, and there were people around at the table literally going, who was looked best in a bikini? And I was like, does it matter? Like, the woman's just won an Emmy. Like, people are going to pick it up anyway. You don't need to put her in a bikini. People are going to pick it up regardless. Like, this woman is going to draw people in. And I just refused to do it. I was like, I'm not doing the interview. I'm not doing that, whatever. When it came to renewing my contract, I didn't get that renewal again. And now it could be anything. It could have been another thing. But also, I was just thinking, maybe another reason women don't get jobs, maybe, sexism, boys' club, pregnancy, but maybe also, like, if an industry is geared up to sort of push around other women, if you're a woman, you're less likely to do that, maybe, in some ways. So this high-profile magazine makes a lot of money out of the fact that there's skimpy women in it. So maybe if you're the editor that says, do you know what, if I become editor, I'm not doing that, then you'll never get that job. I don't know, maybe it's the same with labels. If, like, you know, you represent artists and all those artists have to, you know, maybe if you're a woman, you wouldn't do it.
Artists with clothes on, yeah?
Maybe it'd be harder.
So do you think, this is for everyone again, that it's easier for us if we behave kind of like a boy, like a tomboy? Is it easier for us as a female in the industry then? Because I know a personal story where a successful female business owner had to create a male email account just to be taken seriously from managers. Oh, wow. And it is shocking, but does this sound familiar? Is it easier for us to behave like a man?
Well, okay, I wouldn't say it's easier for us to behave like a male. I would say we should behave like go-getters, be very ambitious and know what we want and just go for it. And, you know, some of those traits lie with men. They're very focused, know what they want. And, you know, like you were saying earlier, that some ladies maybe fall off at some point. But if the majority of ladies were go-getters, then I wouldn't feel the need that they should create a fake male account. I think that's a bit extreme. You should stick to who you are, know yourself, know what you want, and just focus and just go for it. That's what I think.
I completely agree with that. I think it is 100%, like, it's factually is an issue, and there's like the pay gap and all of that. But also, I think it's kind of important to not go in to the industry thinking, oh, well, I'm only going to get a certain price because I'm a woman to do it. Because I personally, and like a lot of these ladies are much further away in their career than them, so I think, you know, it's something I probably will face in a few years' time. But I actually haven't really felt at any point that I've been kind of dismissed or not listened to for being a woman. So I feel like it is a massive issue, but also I don't know. I don't want people to be going in feeling downbeaten already. I think it's exactly what you said. Kind of go in and be like, prove that it shouldn't be an issue. I think we should be going into it in a way, not in a downtrodden way, like, oh, I'm not going to get there where the guys are. I think go in and be like, I am going to be the woman that is. I do deserve to be equal, and definitely go in it with that go-getter attitude, and in your head, and you. And like in all of our minds, we are 100% certain that we can do the job as the man, probably better. No jokes, but the same. but yeah, and I think definitely go in and just have that attitude and just get your head down, just work really hard, and maybe we'll definitely still do have more to prove. So step up to it. Let's kind of go out there and show how deserving we are to be, in that top management, but to be in those board meetings and to be making those massive decisions. Just go in there with that positive mentality, and let's really prove, why we're striving for this equality, because we deserve it.
Side note, when a woman is displaying some sort of firm behavior, that's being interpreted as aggressiveness. Yeah. And when a man is being equally firm, he's just being authoritative. So there's a very fine line there where we kind of have to be careful not to be bitchy, That's just how we're kind of called if we are a little bit more, solid on our own terms. But I wanted to bring up Hillary Clinton, who is now probably going to be the first female president of the States, and how she...
We don't know. Let's keep politics away.
We'll keep politics. I'm going to bring up Sheryl Sandberg.
Let's not go with Trump, for goodness sake.
Yeah. Sheryl Sandberg, who is the CEO of Facebook, she has this project that she's really investing in a lot of time and a lot of energy and money, of Facebook money into it. It's called Lean In, and it's about teaching and inspiring women about, being leaders in the world, and certain methods on how to do that without kind of sacrificing on who you are, but at the same time finding that right balance between, being a leader and being a woman, being charismatic, and not being too interpreted as being flirty, because that's also another massive issue. Although, men flirt all the time in their meetings. And I was reading a book, actually. It was more like a review of a book, I have to say. I can't remember what it's called, but it was about a person's sexual capital. And I know it sounds a bit weird, but it's all about charisma, and how as a person, charisma has a really high percentage of influence in business, whether you're a woman or a man. Everybody does it. And if you're a pleasant person, pleasant, not to look at, but to be around with, that like really, not necessarily to look at, although that's not excluded, but that helps a lot. Helps a lot with moving the conversation, the business conversation forward. So it's an interesting one. I think it's very real. I think I've noticed in a lot of meetings or calls where they're kind of cold. I don't have a very good relationship with that person. We're just meeting up or talking to each other for the first time. The chit chat, the conversation that's friendly, and it shows that you have very good social skills, helps a lot to kind of navigate the business conversation better and get them more interested in whatever you have to sell to them. Yeah, that's it.
I just wanted to pick up what Roberta said. It is about being positive, having a positive attitude about a situation, and believing that if that job is yours, that you should go for it, regardless of whether you're a male or female. If you genuinely feel that you have the skills and the ability to do that job, then go for it. Because for me, the job wasn't necessarily. I mentioned that I got promoted, but there was a few things I had to go through in order to get that job. But the job for me was created because I created the opportunity through persistence, and because it wasn't like handed over to me, because I'd been passed over 3 or 4 times before that. So I had to make myself visible for them to notice me. And I didn't throw my toys out my pram. I didn't say, is it because I'm a woman, or is it because of lack of diversity, whatever. I just was like, okay, that's my job, and that's what I kept focusing on. I'm going to find the next talent, and then you're really going to hear me. And it wasn't until one of the other managers, as I looked after, he went to another label, and he was going to poach me to go and work with him. That's when they realised, okay, we're going to lose her. We need to promote her.
Bargaining power.
So yeah, so it's about positioning yourself.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
I think it's important to know your value and your worth, and to know that any job opportunity that presents itself to you, that is something that you want to do, and that is your job for the taking.
Yeah, and to add to that as well, following on from what Roberta was saying, yeah, I mean, she's completely right. Like, yeah, there are tons of opportunities, and I'm conscious that I've been sitting here being like, me, society. But, which, I mean, I think that, like, you have to, if you go in aware, you'll be better armed to deal with the situation. But there's, like, so much opportunity and so much potential. And, I mean, if you imagine that, like, 75 years ago, that women are 51% of the Earth's population, and 75 years ago, we didn't get the opportunities to create. And now, right now, 2016, this is the best it's ever been for women. Like, the possibilities are truly endless. Like, what we can create, what we can make people... Oh! Oh, they cut me off. I'm too radical. That's why.
Yeah.
Mute? I'll just use this. Yeah. Speak again. Okay, yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, just saying, like, and not just for the women, but also for the chaps. Like, you know, there's the opportunities, the things, like, we're living in a generation that our children will look back and be like, oh shit, you lived in 2016, that was wicked. And I was like, yeah, that's right, kids. We were there, man. And I think it's a really exciting time. And yeah, anything I say that seems a bit negative, like, I just want to assert, like, this is a really hopeful, brilliant time to be alive, to be a woman, to be a young man, to be a young person. It's great. But just, you have to go in with your eyes open, basically. Yeah.
I would absolutely agree with that. And I think that, when you're talking about charisma and, getting out there, that things have never been better in a certain time. I mean, I see things improving all the time. When I was first on varying committees, I used to be the token woman. But now I'm on committees, and we've got, about quarter of the committee is made up of women. And it's getting there. It really is. And I think that also, I think we have to have a kind of, that we mustn't sort of be grumpy about it, if that makes any sense, that we have to kind of go out there with a very positive, where actually you're not going to get rid of us, we're actually here, and you better enjoy it, and because we are. And I think if we've got that attitude, it's a little bit different, than maybe how it may have been perceived in the past, where we were suddenly really, really kind of down on things, and saying we're not getting this and we're not getting that. But I think things are gradually improving, really do.
Okay. Just one more question before we actually go to the Q&A with the audience. It's great to be confident, a go-getter, assertive. Those are all wonderful things. But what about self-care for women in these leadership positions? How do you balance that?
Very glad you asked that, because this week I'm actually going to host 2 events at this event called Amsterdam Dance Event 80, which is it's probably the largest electronic music conference in Europe that brings together everybody in kind of dance music, and now hip hop and urban as well. And the 2 events, they have the same theme. It's called Health versus Hedonism, and it tackles sort of the issues that come along with working in the music industry, whether you're an artist or an executive, related to, nightlife, being pretty much a night owl, all the temptations that come, the alcohol, the drugs, sleepless nights, always being on call 24 hours 7. If you're a manager, for example, expect that. And all these pressures, to kind of always deliver as an artist, but also as an executive at the same time. The stress, the pressure, it can have a huge toll, and we've seen it in artists, like Amy Winehouse, Kurt Cobain, like going to that extreme. And now Kid Cudi, he just came out with, he's in rehab now because he had a few suicide attempts. and it's real, and we've been taught as a society in general, but all in music particularly, not to display our weaknesses, not to display our problems, because they are interpreted as weaknesses, as if we're the only people who are dealing with anxiety and self-doubt. No, everybody's going through it, and it's as Coco said, it's a great time now to speak out and have these conversations and just be open about it without thinking that we're going to be stigmatized. And probably we will. Probably the average person will judge us and will misinterpret what we've just said. But it's the only catalyst that's going to, make a change. And I feel like more and more, like the late 80s and the 90s were very destructive. It was chaotic. It was like you would go at it and... I've just watched Vinyl on HBO, and it kind of taught me that you would have a meeting with the board, with the label, and there would be Coke on the table for everybody. I don't know if that was that's what really happened, but I think it was a pretty drug-infused phase in the music industry. And now, I don't know if it's because 2016, if there's a radical movement for health and well-being in general, at least in the developed countries in the Western world, that the music people are kind of following as well, and there's way more attention that's being paid to making time for yourself. And it is very important, whether you work in music or not, you have to make time for yourself to exercise a little, even if it's just a little yoga or jog or whatever makes you happy, or just playing football, I don't know. You have to make time for yourself, for your body and for your mind, because that will ultimately make you more creative, more productive, just a better person. Sad people, distressed people do not deliver great work.
Yeah, mental health is definitely important. And I know our senior course lecturer, Andy East, in the back over there, who's looking behind himself, he's actually working on a module focusing on mental health, because it's very critical. Like, people like to just be constantly like the Energizer Bunny and trying to always prove their self-worth and prove their value, because the competition is fierce. But, at the end of the day, burnout is real. And you can easily take yourself out if you just go a little bit too far. So that's why I'm glad you answered candidly about that. Thank you. Did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to add that basically, personal development is very important in terms of whatever profession you're in. It's important to look after your mind as much as it is your body, because I think with the music industry, which overlaps into the fashion and everything else, there's that external obsession of how to look, the importance of how you look rather than how you feel. I think our emotions or feelings are suppressed to the point of that we're working like robots, whether you're an artist, whether you're an executive. And I think if we're more honest with ourselves, then we can be honest with other people around us about how we're feeling, in terms of how we've been treated, or how, if you're having a bad day, you're forced to constantly be on it. Like, if you're not on it, there's someone right behind you willing to take your position. But I think you have to be brave enough to step off that fast track. And I experienced burnout, but before, I think the one thing that saved me was meditation and the importance of meditation. Some people may not appreciate it or even feel like how it can fit into their life, but I can honestly tell you it really, really helped in a great deal in terms of mental state and just like health in general, because it is a very stressful environment. No matter how much you love the business, it is still a stressful environment, because as the saying goes, you're only as successful as your last hit or last job or whatever. As a songwriter, same thing. As an artist, as someone who's signed an act, you're only as successful as that last success. So you're constantly bettering yourself. So it's important to look after yourself. Find a ritual that you love, whether it be going to the gym, whether it be going yoga, whether it be going on holiday, taking time out for yourself to reevaluate yourself and make sure that you are well. Because if you're not well, you can't do the job or any job.
Right. I think it's hard. I think balance is something that I'm still learning. Like, I'm still trying to work it out because it's kind of, with my role as well, we're, as part of a job description, which is obviously an amazing part of the job description, is going to gigs. So, like, yeah, I can sometimes be kind of going to like 3 gigs a week. And then obviously I also want to see my friends. And it's forward planning is helpful. If I know I've got 3 gigs a week, then I'll kind of see if there's a night where I can actually have an early night and make sure I keep that night free. So I think being aware, forward planning helps. And just do little things, like maybe just say, look, one night a week I'm going to try and go to bed at 10. Obviously it won't happen all the time, but just have like set little goals. And also with kind of like when the music industry, I think, blurs like professional and personal lives a lot, because then obviously at gigs, that is, for a lot of people, that's like their main social activity of the week, whereas we're doing it a lot. And I was sometimes a bit worried, especially when I first started at MTV, when I was meeting new people, for me to be like, oh no, I'm not drinking. So I was like, oh no, I don't want like my contact at Warner to think I'm boring, you know? And it is still that kind of social thing, but they won't, number one, because everyone is in it. And I'm always like gigs now, and I'm like, I'm not drinking. Then like somebody like, oh yes, I'm on like a juice thing. It's been, you know, especially over summer, it gets so hectic. So don't kind of feel the pressure that if you are out that you have to be drinking at these things. Really don't be afraid to say, God, guys, I'm having this one out, especially if it's like a Tuesday or even if it's a Friday, you don't want to. Don't feel pressure to, because you really won't make any difference. You know, the fact that you're there and, you know, you're still socialising and you're there, I think don't be afraid, because it's still something, that was only like a few months ago when I first started. I was a bit like, oh, and then I was like, actually, I am being silly, like, it's fine.
Yeah.
And and I think maybe like technology, because you're always on it, and especially with emails now, we're on phone. Like, I find myself sat like watching telly, and I'll automatically just start checking my emails at 10 at night. It's because it's like habit, and then my mind's awake, and then you don't sleep very well. So just set yourself. Obviously, life gets in the way of routine. So, but if you could just set yourself little goals that you try and achieve sometimes. So like whether, you know, I'm actually not going to look at my phone between 10 p.m. and 11 p.m. at night, or 9 and 10. And if you manage to do that 3 nights a week, then great. And just be aware and just think of little goals you can set yourself to do things that kind of do give you a break, I'd say.
Yeah, I agree with Roberta. Like, you shouldn't feel pressure to do anything. Like, if you don't smoke, you know, don't smoke. If you don't drink, don't drink. Don't feel like you need to, you know, do things like that because of your colleagues or your friends as well. And in terms of people contacting you late at night, there's a button on what's it, iPhone, that's do not disturb. So, you know, that's what I do. So people know, do not contact me after 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. You will not get through to me. Yes, I am alive, but you would not get through to me. So people know not to contact me. So, yeah, and I think exercise is very important. Like Kayode said, meditation, you know, prayer, or whatever it is that can make you relax. And we're very lucky in the UK because most of us can, you know, if we're working, we've got 28 days holiday. Take your holiday. Make sure you do. You know, I know people get tempted for it to roll over to, you know, the next year, and some people don't actually take the holiday they're entitled to. We're very lucky in the UK because in America, they only have 10 days. Yeah. And I was talking to the head of legal at Warner yesterday, and when she was based in New York, she never actually got to take her 10 days holiday. And as a woman, she was expected to work harder and do more as well. And the legal environment is very different, you know, to other areas in the music industry where we've got a lot of deadlines and a lot of contracts, and people want this deal this time and that day, and, you know, everybody just wants everything on time. So yeah, just take your holiday, relax, enjoy life, because, you know, we're all going to die one day, whether you like it or not. So we just have to live it up and enjoy the time that we have here, you know?
Thank you so much for that. We'll now use this time to take questions from the audience. Anybody would like to ask the panelists here who have a wealth of knowledge for you to pick? All right. Yes.
I haven't heard any. Me personally, I haven't seen much negative press about War Paint being an all-female band. Admittedly, I was into their first album. How many they've got now? 3? Is it 3 albums? So the first 2, I was on the radar with that. The last one, I didn't notice. One thing that is happening a lot in the music industry, so I get like 1 million press releases, and it's really funny because whoever the PRs are, as soon as they know that you're a woman and that they're pitching a woman, even if the person's just writing about like, I missed my bus and I got splashed by a car on the way past, even if she's thinking about that, they're like, she's a strong female woman and I think you'll really like her. And I'm like, but why? Like, I don't even know. And so I think actually what's happened is that, I'm just speculating, I really have no idea, but it could be that what's happened is that people have tried to market this movement so much that they're killing it, basically. So the industry is trying to be like, look, she's a strong female woman, look, so much that it's kind of made everyone go like, this sort of thing. So it could be that. I don't know. But I would be, again, I don't know what titles you're talking about, but my experience, and I know a fair amount of music press, yes, there's problems, yes, but in general, they're creative people that are fairly like open-minded, fairly, so I'd be surprised if they're being ragged on just for that, but if they are, that might be why.
Well, Glastonbury had a stage, right? That was female only, and it kind of, I can't remember, I don't think I read the entire article on The Guardian, but they did quite an extensive coverage of it, and it seemed to have caused some controversy, but ultimately was kind of interpreted as a positive thing, because I personally, in spite of running a female-only community online, our events are about inclusivity and diversity, and we get men and women on stage alike and in the audience. And we don't focus on conversations that are about gender. We just talk about topics of the industry in a very subtle way, promoting more and more women to be at the forefront of these conversations and to be aware of the resources that they have available and to be aware of the role models that they have, and just slowly but surely encourage more women to get into things that they weren't aware that they can previously. So I don't like an all-female lineup myself, but it's important to have them in order to raise awareness. I feel like it's purely a PR stunt, if you want to call it that way. And I don't think having an all-female band was on purpose, I guess. I don't know the story of Warpaint, but it should if that was the case, if they got negative press because they're an all-female, it's just silly. However, those who do put together female-only lineups and female-only projects, they do that not because they want a female-only world out there, but it's because it raises awareness about this issue. It gets people talking. It's a bit controversial. Obviously, I don't think none of us wants really to just live in a female-only world. I mean, that's not our purpose here. It's all about equality, but you have to be a little bit extreme in order to raise your point and get people talking about you. It's just how it works.
Just make the point about female groups. Obviously, there seems to be no problem with female groups because they are perhaps portraying something different than female bands. So it's almost like perhaps female bands are seen more or less feminine, and female groups obviously promotes, dare I say, sex. So it's acceptable for them to be jiggling their bits around, but for them to be playing an instrument and actually being musicians, I'm not sure why there should be a huge issue. I mean, it's for me that, it's like the difference between the two. One group is holding an instrument, the others are moving their instruments. But
It's
Shots fired.
ultimately, female faces, right?
yeah. I mean, it's funny because I started doing a story on this and then just didn't. But maybe now that I've done this, maybe I'll pick it up again. But it's all about like female drummers. So like if you ever look at the back of the NME, you'll see like, oh hi, I've got a really crap band and I need someone else to join my crap band. It's all like those ads like that. But you'll notice there's like looking for a drummer, no females, looking for a drummer, no females. And it's this area that still exists, female drummers. Like you can't get work if you're a female drummer. It's really, really weird. I think it ties into what you were saying.
Unless you're like Lenny Kravitz's drummer, who's
Yeah.
she drums in a sexy way. But I think primarily maybe the band are not sexy. I hope that answers your question.
I mean, in terms of, I mean, for me, it's all about the music. You know, totally about the music. And, you know, the lineup really doesn't matter. It's, I think, about the actual sound of it and what that means. And so whether you got, you know, who you got, as long as they're good and as long as they're getting the song across, you know, being a songwriter, then I don't mind who anybody is. And in fact, that's for some. The reason I say that is because the thing that came into my mind wasn't anything about a woman. It was about I saw the early videos of Paolo Nutini when he was playing in a pub in Paisley in Scotland, and I'm kind of along the coast from that, although my accent is American, yeah, a bit. But when you looked at the band, it was all age groups. It was, you know, it was just such a strange mixture of people, and it was fantastic because it felt like all musicians together, and that feels like what's important to me, certainly.
We have a couple of questions from Twitter. Ahmad Karkuti has asked, Coco, with you being a woman, what kept you going after every challenge, and how did you deal with all of the sexism in the industry?
I like that you said, with you being a woman. Just to confirm, I am a woman, yes. What was the question?
Yeah, he said, with you being a woman, what kept you going after every challenge, and how did you deal with all of the sexism in the industry? I'm assuming he's talking from a journalistic standpoint.
Yeah,
I mean, male-dominated.
So I mean, journalism is a strange industry. I mean, one of the first questions you asked was how the industry's changed. And so when I first started getting into journalism, there was like a very distinct thing. So there was like serious journalists and then like fluffy lifestyle journalists. And so if you were music, you sort of sat kind of maybe more on the serious end of lifestyle. That's changed a lot. And actually now the sort of serious gatekeepers are looking at lifestyle and culture and things like that as being a prism for which we understand the world. Like the fact that BBC Newsbeat has a whole area which is just for youth news, the fact that Vice have their own news channel, all those things. The industry's changed a lot. So with that has meant that kind of political change has also happened. So yeah, I've definitely had sexism for sure, but I've also been luckily of a generation where that's sort of changing and it's kind of moving upwards. In terms of how I deal with it, I just laugh at it. I've got a WhatsApp group with loads of other girlfriends and we just rip the shit out of everyone. That makes it all much better. Obviously, as a journalist, I'm lucky to have a platform so I can tweet stuff and you can get people... I mean, of course, you get the odd, like, egg on Twitter being like, but what about Brexit? And you're like, I'm not even talking about that. Like, that's something else, but okay. But then, and you can sort of, you know, you share these experiences and actually hearing from other people and women, men, people in different countries alike sort of gives you hope. As I said, like I think it's actually a really amazing time to be alive, an amazing time for the world, even though it's scary, even though it's troubling at points. So yeah, that's always what's got me through is this kind of furious hope for the future, I think.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Another question on Twitter from Jess is for Abby. Do you have any tips or advices for aspiring music lawyers?
I would say go to as many seminars as you can. You'll be surprised that you can learn a lot through seminars rather than, I'm not going to say university, but because I'm at university, so yeah, I didn't say that. But yeah, because I went to a lot of seminars. There are organizations like Urban Development, the Media Music Company, Creating Vision, which Kwame Kwarteng runs, and he's a very popular music manager, but you know, it does overlap with, you know, music law in most of these events. And there's the Music Managers Forum who do an intellectual property law course as well. So, and it's, you know, ongoing. So those are the things that I would say. And I would say it would be good for you to have a genuine passion in music, because if you don't, then it wouldn't make any sense. Because at the end of the day, you know, you want to do something that you're passionate about, not because of the money, because it wouldn't make sense. That would be like slavery, you know. It wouldn't make any sense. But yeah, that would be my advice. And go to as many gigs as you can. Early in my career, I was going to gigs. I was meeting up and coming artists who then turned to me, when they needed help with their contracts, and their legal representation. So then that's how I sort of got my foot in the door that way as well. So that's the advice.
I think for any part of the music industry, whatever area you're going to go into, events and seminars are great because I think it's very interesting hearing different people talk, and you really do kind of learn things, but also use then social media. Like I still do it now, of course. I think just networking is really important in the industry. But Eventbrite is really good for like industry events. Have a look on there, social media, see what's going on. And then also, I always follow up if there was someone who spoke at the event that you were like, oh my God, I would love to do what they do, or I found them really interesting. Just tweet them and tell them, hey, I was at the event, it was really great. And then at least your name, follow them, tweet them and say hi and that you love them, and then at least your name is there. And then further down the line, maybe you want to apply for a job there, and then there, you can recognize the name and say, hey, I reached out to you on Twitter after I saw you at the event, it was great, and things like that. Whatever area of the industry you're wanting to go in, I think that's a great way to start building up contacts, from early on.
Yeah, contacts are very important, and work experience as well. I know Meg might not agree with working for free at some points, but if you do not have any experience whatsoever, then an internship, would be a good idea, but not like a long-term thing. Maybe two weeks or something. I started off doing a 2-week work experience in a big law firm in Oxford Circus, and that was just a way to get my foot in the door. It's 2 weeks. I actually did that on my holiday. So I took a 2-week holiday to do 2 weeks of something that I actually, like to do and enjoy as well. So technically I was getting paid by being on holiday, but working on a 2-week internship. So you could do a lot of work experience. And another thing you could do is make speculative job applications. If you feel like a law firm is not recruiting, then you can make the applications, speculative, and send an email with your CV, a short covering letter. And, they might be looking in the future, or just, be aware that, you're interested and get in touch if they do have something available as well.
That's how I actually got my first kind of music kind of industry job, doing the socials for Carl Cox. Because I was just basically looking. I knew I wasn't happy doing what I'm doing, and I'd done it for 2 years, and I'd learned loads of great experience. But I was like, okay, now I feel like I know what I want to do. And I actually was just Googling cool companies in music, and I was just reading all about them. And if there was one that I felt, then ones that I felt that I was particularly good fit for and that really struck me, I was just emailing them and made every email personal to that particular company, and actually they just got back in touch and were looking for someone. And because I'd worked out in Ibiza and had the electronic music experience, someone was leaving who was running the Carl Cox account, and they needed someone. And that is how I ended up, by literally just going through and sending them an email saying why I liked them so much in my CV. And that's how I actually ended up kind of making the first break into the industry. So yeah.
And I was just going to add, work experience is definitely a really good way forward, because it gives you the opportunity to find out exactly what you want to do, and also gives the potential future employer to get to know you, and you are able to then show your personality and really make inroads, build relationships, network. And whether it's 2 weeks or 6 months, it's very integral doing work experience, because it's very hard to get in the business, but getting your foot in the door, once you're in there, you can then make your presence felt in a positive way by showing how, how driven you are, where you want to go. And you may find that you have something of value to add to that company because of your, in terms of whether you've got some knowledge in social media or where your passion lies, you can add value to someone's organization if you put yourself forward. So, yeah.
Great. Are there any more questions from the audience? Yes, in the back. Can you give advice on negotiating salary?
Aim high.
Like strategy?
Lie as much as you can without being caught. Just be like, well, actually, I already had another offer from Mr. Mahmood, who's basically your uncle, but it doesn't matter. Like, they're never going to find out. So just give it a go. I mean, if they want you, they want you. The worst they can say is like, look, actually, this is the best I can do, and then at least you know, well, at least you know what you're getting.
Some jobs do ask for your W-2 forms, though.
The
Like
what?
when you, in
for the
America, that happened to me.
What, sorry?
They ask for the W-2 forms to see what you made in your previous job, and then it's like a small
Not
America.
America.
I don't know how it
They
is
do,
in the
not
UK, but it's pretty unfair.
You can add like $5,000
Yeah.
or something on top of what you've earned previously, just to give you a
Wow.
little boost.
Yeah, never
And
go
then-
less. Never go
Yeah,
less.
yeah.
I think for starters, I think just do a bit of research. If you have people that are in the industry, ask them what they started out on, so you kind of know where to pick it. I know kind of money is still can be a bit of a taboo topic, but maybe if you've got friends that are close enough, you know, here or home that are going into similar industries, if they don't mind sharing with you what they started on, or people that are further down the line, you can, I mean, I'm sure that they're happy to say what they started on. Maybe that to do a little bit of research so you know you're not being sold short, and then add a couple of grand on what they're earning and try to get that.
What's like the website here to actually check the salary, the average salary or median salary for certain positions here?
There's a specific website, but there's a lot of online recruitment companies that music industry use. There used to be one particular company they use, but I think there's so many other companies now. But I think it's like looking at those job specs and sort of gauging where you are, and you know, sort of like working out your living expenses, because sometimes you have to be realistic. Well, not sometimes, you have to be realistic. You don't expect your job to be giving you X and then living in an unshared flat. You might have to share for a little while until you found your feet and basically compromise. But ultimately, I think if you look online, there's agencies that kind of give you the spec of the job that you might be going for, and it'll give you a sort of a rough idea of what the salary is.
I think recruiters is a good,
The what?
like recruiters, you mentioned them, because they know that's the job. So if, you know, they're really good at helping as well, especially if you're worried about not having contacts in the industry, recruiters are a good way, and then they know, and they actually, because they kind of make a commission off what you get, they will actually push for you to get a good salary. So yeah, that's a good point to kind of, they're good to check.
Yeah. In journalism, most of the journalists use a site called Gorkana. So most journalists sort of post their jobs on that, and there's a couple of others that are around that. But you'll notice on most of the jobs that it's all like DOE, dependent on experience, which means what to anyone, nobody knows. And so like it's very in the media, it's very, very closed about what people pay, because it's an industry that is both booming and struggling at the same time. But one thing I would say is that like I'm part of a lot of like journalist-focused Facebook groups. And so the ones I'm in, if you guys are just starting out or at entry level, they might not be so relevant because there'll be loads of stuff in there that you're just like, what? But there's loads and loads and loads. I mean, one that springs out if you are interested in journalism is a group called Journo Answers. Join it on Facebook group. There's like professional journalists in there, senior editors, but also loads and loads of newcomers. And you can get commissions on there, but you can also just ask questions like, guys, how much should I charge for this? How much should I pay for this? That's just one on top of my head, but there are a number of them, and they exist on Facebook and other platforms. Find them, reach out to the hives. If you can't get an answer from a recruiter, and you certainly can't get one from an editor, you'll find it from your peers. So just try and track those communities down and join them and chat.
Also, I think a very good idea is probably to think of what your bottom line is first. You know, knowing what you're not going to go below. And my trick, because being a freelance, that I've been negotiating for such a long time on different platforms, and sometimes you have to ask the person that's going to be employing you, what's your budget? In other words, ask them to tell you what they want you to say, and then say, oh, that's interesting, because what's very difficult when you're negotiating is you think you're going to sort of push yourself out of the job by asking for too much. And so it's good to know what they're thinking. So if you say, well, because my phrase, because I kind of smooth, I guess, sometimes, and so I would be saying, well, I'm sure that we can come to some kind of arrangement. What figure did you have in mind? And then, and then they've said it. They say the figure. And you've already thought of your figure beforehand, before you've walked in the door. And you say, interesting. And you can say, well, I think we could probably do something around that, although I was thinking of a little higher, perhaps. I wonder if you could go to that extra 500 or so, and kind of explain it. And if you do, they realize that you're going to be someone they can negotiate with and they can work with. That's just a handy hint.
Also, there's a blog or an online magazine called Music Business Worldwide. They advertise jobs on there all the time, so I don't know if you've heard of them before, but it just came to me. But yeah, so weekly they advertise jobs. So.
Yeah, that's an awesome resource.
Yeah, and the last thing I'd say is that I've been in journalism now for nearly 10 years. I've done all right, done newspapers, done international stuff, but I still can't stand those conversations. I get really nervous about it. I've got terrible imposter syndrome where I'm like, that person's going to find out I'm not a real journalist. Oh, that person's going to know I'm not any good. Oh, shit, I have that all the time. Is it happening again?
Oh, it did. Okay.
Your battery's worn out.
Oh, it's the swearing.
It switches off when you swear. No,
Sorry, I won't swear anymore, whoever the audio gods are. I'm sorry. I still have that imposter syndrome, and it never, ever gets easy. So if you have a moment where someone's being like, I will offer you a packet of crisps, and you're like, oh, God, should I take it? That's completely normal. It's fine. Sometimes you make the wrong decision sometimes. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Like, everybody does it. Everybody still does it now. So, don't feel like, oh, my God, this is my one chance. This is like that Eminem film. Like, it's fine. If you mess it up, it's okay. Or song, whatever. It's okay. And everything's a learning curve, and they still take time. And I'm learning now. And, I'm sure all of us are still learning now. So don't worry about it.
Wow. So I guess we can talk about these topics for hours, but we have to come to an end.
Yeah, it's actually 5 o'clock. We had so much fun hearing what you had to share, resources that the audience and us included can take away from this panel discussion. Yeah. So thank you so much for your time. Yeah. You were phenomenal. Yes. And also, we would like to take this moment to thank Andrew East, also known as Andy East, the senior course lecturer.
Thank you, Andrew East.
For trusting us that we can do this.
Yes. And David Osborne as well. What was that? Oh, goodness. Okay. And David Osborne as well. Thank you to him for helping us to facilitate this. And also thank you to the IT, James Bell and his team up there who have made the live stream possible. To Jackie Crossman for catering. We're just so appreciative, even for the student volunteer facilitators for doing the workshops, where we had such an invigorating and lively conversation, wouldn't you say? No, but it was wonderful, and we just thank you all for coming out. Thank you again to the panelists. You're wonderful women.
Thank you for having us.
And everybody have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
And I give my mic to Andrew.
Okay, yes.